Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Lisa, Hendey, and Friends. I'm so happy to be back with you on this Monday, right after the second Sunday of Advent, and to welcome a really special guest today, my friend and fellow Ave Maria Press co-author, Scott Weeman. I know you're going to absolutely fall in love with Scott and the beautiful book that I'm going to share with you today, and I'm just absolutely thrilled to welcome Scott and to help you to get to know this amazing person who's just been such a great blessing in my life the last few years. And there he is. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Lisa.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. How are you?
I'm happy to be with you today. I have a lot of things on my mind, and it's just actually I'm really glad to be with a fellow Californian today. So for so many reasons. If you're just joining us, the main point of our conversation today is going to be to dive in and to share Scott's amazing book. I know you're going to be seeing it backwards. The book is called The 12 Steps and the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery. And just in case you're getting ready to tune out and say, well, I'm not in recovery and I don't have those issues, I'm going to urge you to stay tuned, because I think what you're going to hear from Scott, as I feel what I've learned from Scott, is going to bless your life in so many possible ways. And for people that are tuning in now to our Facebook Live, I'd like to share that we're going to be giving away a special signed copy of Scott's book. And so all you have to do is join us and leave a little comment. You can simply say hi, and you'll be entered to win this fabulous book. Scott, before we jump into the book, there's a couple things on my mind today. The first is, I mean, we can't be both from California without talking about the fires that have been raging through our state for the last week. Tell me how things are down there in San Diego.
We certainly felt it this week. We could kind of feel the, just the state being in, just a state of anxiety a little bit. Just, I'm sure, just can feel it in the air, and then the people. Concern and love, it raises interesting questions. Even if I don't live in an area that was affected by the fires, nor was there really the likelihood of it, but it just makes you think about certain questions. What are the important, valuable things that you own? What are important things to you? And that becomes more real as you hear stories of people who have lost everything, and sadly. But what we have is each other, so that certainly adds a bit of reflection and perspective.
I had that moment, I think it was Wednesday night. I was supposed to be at my husband's Christmas party, but it was happening on the other side of the Skirball fire evacuation zone. So I would have had to drive through that. So I decided, and I'm going to stay off the road tonight and make way for the firefighters, which literally we have firefighters, circuiting our state to all different areas. They go wherever they're needed. And I got that kind of scary, that emergency broadcast alert on your phone went off on 3 of my devices all at once. And certainly you can't miss it. So that made me very happy to know that I would not sleep through that alert. But it was basically like the get ready to evacuate alert, because we're about 3 miles away from this Skirball fire, which is gratefully now 85% contained. But I did that. I thought, okay, what am I going to put in a bag right now if I have to run out the door? And surprisingly for me, there weren't all that many things that I needed to tuck in there. So that what you mentioned about the people in our lives being the most important. And I know you're a newlywed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But so if you're watching, just please keep our brave firefighters in your prayers, our first responders, and especially all the families that have lost loved ones, that have lost property, that are now situated in evacuation centers around the state. And please join us in praying for rain. I think we have such great teachings from Pope Francis on the climate and our stewardship of our earth. And so we're praying for that. And also, Scott, did you see the news today about what's happening in New York City?
I haven't, no.
So apparently there was another act of terrorism. Thankfully, there was no immediate loss of life in this, but in New York City this morning, a pipe bombing. And so we're sending prayers that way. And, just for safety in all of our cities. And I've been thinking this morning about what can I do? One little person to help with us, but we're praying for peace, especially as we lead up to the holidays. So Scott, how's your Advent going?
It's been going great. I think it's the most intentional I've been in approaching Advent, and from the start, trying to set up time to find some quiet time in the midst of chaos. There's a lot of great things happening and really awesome opportunities in my life, professionally, personally. It's been really great, but also just setting some time away to be grateful for that. Take each day one day at a time. I think that, as you mentioned, it's really easy to get caught up in a lot of the cultural things that are taking place, some events that are hard to even just reconcile, whether it be some things that are taking apart, individual people, falling into, or just kind of some things coming to the surface. That when you get focused on that, I think it can be really easy to find, to maybe lose hope in oneself and in our society. But being a part of a fellowship and being active in some other individuals who are finding the fruits and the freedom of recovery, and one day at a time, finding God really placing himself in their lives, makes it easier to see that, what can one person do to change, and just aligning ourselves with others who are looking to make a positive change or difference in their lives today has been really great and has accelerated my Advent, I'd say, quite a bit.
I think, I mean, as you who are watching today and listening later on are going to learn, this is definitely one person who's taken something that many would consider a defeat in life and turned it into this beautiful opportunity to help others. Now would probably be a great time for me to formally introduce Scott Weeman. While we've never met in person, I consider Scott both a friend and a mentor. And I mentioned coming in that we're both fellow authors for Ave Maria Press. And so, again, if you're just joining us today, today is your chance to win a copy of Scott's new book. And let me just read you his formal bio. I'm like a proud mom, Scott. You have a proud second mom living in Los Angeles. Scott Weeman is the founder and executive director of Catholic in Recovery, a nonprofit organization that seeks to help those suffering with addictions. Weeman has appeared on EWTN's The Journey Home. Shout out to Matt Swaim. We love you. As well as Christopher Closeup. Tony Rossi, I have to say a huge thank you to you because your column about Scott's work on Pathos was actually the very first time that Scott came onto my radar. So I owe you a debt of gratitude for that. Catholic Answers and the Catholic Hipster podcast. Okay, I don't know if Tommy is actually ever going to see this, but Tommy, we love you too. Scott's work has been featured on Alate and Pathos, and he earned his bachelor's degree in organizational management in 2017. Yay, Scott! It was a big year for you from Point Loma Nazarene University, where he's a graduate student in clinical counseling. And he's also a newlywed living in San Diego with his beautiful wife, Jacqueline. So right. Scott, welcome formally.
Thank
so
you.
let's dive into the conversation about the book by finding out a little bit more about kind of, I personally, I know the answer to this, but what prompted you to write this particular book?
Yeah, this is a good story and one that I'm just grateful to share. So I got sober in October of 2011. Had a hopeless condition of alcoholism and drug addiction and a variety of other things that were kind of moving me. So I got sober by the grace of God, finding, and the help of many individuals who helped me get that way. And so over the course of several years, diving into the 12 steps of addiction recovery and embracing the sacraments of the Catholic Church, while at the same time I began doing some writing about the overlap of those two things. And by people knowing people, friends having friends, I was, interviewed by Tony Rossi with Christopher Closeup. And one day I was working at a restaurant down here in San Diego, which I had put in 8 years in the service industry, loved it. Didn't like my job title, but liked my job, and was working one night, and our bathroom we also referred to as the phone booth, which was where we went, and we weren't supposed to have our phones in the restaurant with us. So I went into the phone booth to check my messages and maybe make plans for the evening, and had a Facebook message from a one Lisa Hendey, who had read something that I had done, or an interview, and inquired if I was interested in doing some more writing. Which I was, sitting there in the phone booth at work one day, was ready for the next chapter of my life, and in many times very, all too impatient for the next chapter of my life, but was really grateful to have the opportunity to put a short proposal together suggesting what we might be writing about, and that went through, and so the last 2 years or so of my life has been getting to, going through the process of the book here and there, spending some time with it, away from it, which that's a cool experience too, is, spending some time writing writing a lot of thoughts down, spending a few months away from it, and then re-embracing it and rereading it and seeing, what was I thinking at the time, or, wow, this sounds nice, or I remember that, or I have really good editors. Wow, this is amazing.
You and I share an editor, so
Yeah.
I know that. I know that.
Yeah.
And we need to say a huge thank you to Eileen Ponder, who once
Mm-hmm.
the acquisition of this book was decided by Avery and Weir Press, Eileen became the person to. And I know from my own process of working with Eileen that she'll pull things out of you sometimes that you think, really, I'm not sure I want to go there.
Yeah.
But in a book like this, the 12 steps and the sacraments, kind of that personal touch, I think, is what really makes the book. We have to also acknowledge that you have a beautiful introduction from, or foreword from Bishop McElroy from the Diocese of San Diego. How did that come about?
Yeah. He took over as bishop probably 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and has done some really amazing things. And when he got here, made young adult ministry one of the areas of emphasis. And I've gotten to know him a little bit, and in sharing, the journey with him, and asked him if he would be, introduce the book or forward the book, and he was very happy to. He's a very readed man. I sent him the manuscript one day, and I think 3 days later he had sent the forward back to me. I was thinking,
Wow.
wow, maybe he just skimmed through it. But then it's, people have shared with me that he reads incredibly, like, quickly and efficiently, and yeah, he's a very, very learned man. So having him introduce the book has been a great gift.
Yeah, and I think that he's very wise, because the church as a whole is talking a lot, Scott, about how to reach people just like you, the young, who really, I mean, are the leaders that we need right now in our church to help us kind of understand how to reach out to people your age. And, people my age can kind of sit around talking about it, but we need you now to help us. So thank you to the bishop for that. Scott's book, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments, I'm going to be giving away a copy of this later on this week. So to enter to win this particular contest, if you're with us on Facebook Live right now, simply leave a comment here on Facebook, say hi, or if you're listening later on, you can send an email to lisa@catholicmom.com to be entered to win this. Our deadline for that will be next Sunday, the third Sunday of Advent at midnight Pacific time. We'll have more information on that afterwards about how to enter if you're not with us live. Scott, the book opens with your story, and I have to say, I mentioned early on that even if folks aren't struggling with their own addictive personalities, there's so much wisdom in this book. I have loved ones who have gone through the 12-step journey. And I also know for my own self that I rely daily on God's mercy. And so there was one part of this that I just want to read to you, because it really struck me as something that I think anybody needs to hear. You wrote, it was one of the first moments that I experienced the power of vulnerability and honesty. I'd spent years being ashamed of the truth of my situation, hiding my reality from everyone I came into contact with. Now I was confronted with the beautiful notion that if I'm open, weakness leads to unity, and in unity there is victory. My attitude changed from victim to victor with the spiritual aid of God and the help of others. I honestly think that those words, whether or not you're someone who needs the formal 12 steps, points so beautifully to the fact that when we give in to the fact that God made us unique with our flaws and, but also the beneficiaries of his amazing mercy, he can work miracles in our life. So how kind of has that become a hallmark of what you go about in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, that's it right there. That I remember actually the first time I heard someone say that quote. I was sitting in a Bible study, probably about 2 or 3 months sober, sitting in a young adult Bible study, and someone had said, made reference to, in weakness there is unity, in unity there is victory. And there weren't many victories in my life taking place, or at least none that I was tuned to at that time. However, I even mentioned in the book, I think leading up to that, I walked into a a meeting of a fellowship of people who were trying to get sober and had been sober, and they were introducing themselves as alcoholics, and they were doing it in a way that was mysterious to me. They were doing it without the kind of shame that I felt as I was trying to introduce myself in the same way, and doing it in a way where they had witnessed some victory by the aid of God over something that had been killing them, and they were laughing about it too. That was really strange to me. Later on, I come
Laughing
to,
kind of with joy, right?
yeah, laughing with joy about the things that were killing me. And, it was hard to take, but there was something there that was really honest and beautiful and free. And I think that freedom comes when we can like look at situations where we had, acted in ways that maybe weren't the most appropriate, but seeing God's mercy break through that, change us and transform us. We can look back on those moments of our lives where we weren't maybe making the right decisions or weren't working in accordance to God's will, and do it with some freedom that, yes, that was me then, and today I have the chance to make a new story for myself. So yeah, I think that there's unity in that, aligning with our weaknesses rather than trying to just find union in the strengths that we have. That's exhausting, and that's really hard to do, and it's really hard to find any kind of common ground that way.
I think that this is a book that provides a service for anyone with struggles in their life. Certainly your struggles related to substance abuse, to alcohol and drug addiction. But for many people, we're going into a holiday season that's sort of fraught with all kinds of problems, both lots of parties going on around us, and also folks who struggle with eating disorders, with shopping addictions, with overspending. So in your experience of working with folks in recovery, it's extended beyond just those who struggle with alcoholism, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, this time of year is stressful. It's stressful for people. And part of that, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but we're planning gatherings, family gatherings that may only take place once a year. So we're entering into a moment where we want to find union and express our love for each other that we don't do all that often. And so when we do try to make attempts to do so, sometimes it comes with some expectations and other things. And so that makes those holiday gatherings and things stressful, even the anticipation for it. And so oftentimes when that stress comes, dealing with it head on is not an easy thing to do. I know this for years. I never dealt with anything head on. I dealt with it in a bottle or in drugs or using some kind of, short, soft, quick act of pleasure. And, so I think that rather than embracing what we really want, which is union and love, we want to express love for loved ones. But, in doing so, the expectations and things, hopes that we have, can be really tough. And not to mention, that it also brings up the fact and maybe awareness of loved ones that are not around, or, I know that there's many who are heading into Christmas, not knowing if their loved one will be showing up, if they should be extending an invitation, what kind of boundaries should be set. That's a really hard place to be. And my heart goes out to anyone who's listening or watching today that's in that place. I know that there's suffering doesn't just happen in a vacuum. And as a result of, addiction or unhealthy attachments, a lot of us suffer. And, we don't have to do that in isolation, though.
Here's Lisa Hendey being schooled by someone half her age. I love it. Our guest today is Scott Weeman. He's the author of this amazing book, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments. And just a reminder that I'll be giving away an author-signed copy of this wonderful book for someone this week. So if you would like to win a copy of Scott's book, you can just leave a comment here on Facebook or send an email to lisa@catholicmom.com before next Sunday. And Scott, so you brought up something that I think I'm going to ask you to put on your young adult in the church hat for just a moment, and to answer a question that a lot of I think the folks my age that have, younger people in their lives that are your age. So one of the things you had to acknowledge in your own journey was that you had kind of strayed away from your faith background. And I think a lot of folks this leading up to the Christmas season have loved ones who they'd like to invite back to church, but maybe who haven't been there. How can somebody kind of like joyfully and in a way that's not guilt-ridden invite a loved one to come back to church this Christmas?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that anytime that there's an opportunity to bring someone to the church, whether that's only, Christmas or Easter, that's an opportunity for God's grace to move in masses. And so just, I think that provides opportunity. But, I've been thinking about this a little bit too. I think sometimes we go with the approach that we try to evangelize we welcome people into the church and say, "Hi, welcome, come on in. How can we fix you?" And rather it should be, "Come on in. How can we help you?" And so that just, that small little transference of how we approach evangelization. And that's not even an evangelization. It's just how we approach the extension of our love for another person. Of course, we want them to find what we have and their experience to be just like ours is. But I think that when we do so in times when someone's not willing, nor not in a place to do so, it can get in the way of other efforts. So in recovery, one of the traditions of 12-step groups is that they have a policy of attraction rather than promotion. And I think that the church could learn a little bit from that
Say
tradition.
a little bit more about what that means, attraction versus promotion.
Yeah, public relations policy of attraction rather than promotion, which basically means that rather than, I think that it's easy to identify someone and say, you need to come to a group where people are getting sober. There's plenty of people in our lives that would be suitable to say to. However, people don't really respond well to that kind of an invitation. Rather, I think that really just being available and witnessing to those that are willing to hear it is important. Now, we don't always get to choose the willingness of our family members and loved ones. And so sometimes maybe we see or smell willingness and we want to jump in there and, extend that invitation. But let the Lord provide joy in your own life. And I think that people will ask questions and people will want to know what the source of that is. And when you're ready, you can do so in a way that is free, that just shares what it was like, what it's like, or what it was like then, what happened, and what it's like now. And that's easy for me because what it was like then is such a contrast for what it's like now. But even on a day-to-day basis, I can tell you what it was like this morning, what happened to get my head back into realignment and getting a little bit less self-centered and more God-focused, and what my life is like, in this part of my day. So it's just regular metanoia, or kind of transferring our attitude towards God's. And I think that when we do that in our lives, others will follow, including loved ones.
It's interesting, Scott. What you said takes me back to I sort of saw this article this morning on the Jesuit Post. It's an interview with one of my favorite social media gurus, and that's Bishop Paul Ty, who actually is on the Pontifical Council for Culture at the Vatican. And he had this line in the interview about, not using, I'm going to mangle it. I'm not going to say it exactly right, but basically not trying to use our social media or any form of outreach to try to tell people what's wrong with them, but to be inviting people and to use those laws of attraction that you talk about. So even in something as simple as how we share this during this holiday season, something that I'm positive, Scott, your friends who maybe you've been out of touch with for a while, who knew you when you were back in the day, like when your life looked very different than it does now, will say to you, wow, what happened? how you really are on top of your game right now. And the hope that you just exude through your personality, I think is a moment to be sharing some of what helps you to find wholeness and happiness in your life. Right?
Yeah. It's a joyful journey. Yeah. And being able to share other people's joy has been great.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about Catholic and recovery, because the work that you're doing now has extended beyond this book, the 12 Steps and the Sacraments, and into really what I would hope would be something that goes, I'm going to say nationwide and eventually worldwide.
Yeah.
So say a little bit about the work of Catholic and recovery.
Yeah, we just an hour ago, we had a meeting with some individuals from around the country that are looking to do something in their community or in their parish to combat the nature of addiction that just has woven its way throughout our entire culture. And Catholic in Recovery is a nonprofit organization that was started more or less as a blog for me to share the overlap between the 12 steps of the church of recovery and the beauty and wisdom of the church. And then launched into a fellowship, really. We have been meeting for over a year, or about a year, downtown San Diego at St. Joseph's Cathedral, where meeting number 1 has started. And other meetings around San Diego have started as well. And those look and kind of take on the smell or feel of a 12-step meeting, but incorporate Scripture. We incorporate Scripture from the upcoming Sunday's Mass readings, tie in liturgical themes. So we're talking Advent and the themes of hope, quiet, patience, and trust, and really making a way for the Lord now. And also tie in and overlap those with recovery themes. So we read through the long version of the Serenity Prayer, which that second stanza includes just incorporation of Christ's love. And we pray together and then read a reflection each week that ties in those themes I mentioned. And that launches us into an honest and a humble discussion. And it's been really beautiful. And some meetings are specific to individual causes, such as a men's or women's group for people suffering or trying to overcome pornography or sex addiction. But other meetings are just general meetings where we have around a table alcoholics, drug addicts, codependents, pornography and sex addicts, gambling addicts, overeaters, sharing the same solution and the same, being able to identify with perhaps different behaviors, but really all the same beast and the same symptoms of a similar disease, and that is just distance from God. And so being able to find common solution has been wonderful. Some people are finding themselves introduced to the church that way, who have been in recovery, wanted to get deeper into their understanding of their higher power, and are finding so through familiar language, recovery language, but getting their way into the church. And others who are in the pews but have been suffering perhaps for a long time, perhaps not that long, with an addiction can find a Catholic approach to curbing that addiction. So it's been wonderful to see that work in both directions. And one of the things that I've noticed recently is that the transformation that happens really happens in people's eyes. And being able to see people who have been attending these meetings for about a year now, who sometimes slowly, very slowly, picking up on it, maybe getting a day of sobriety, 3 days, 7 days. And then just a month ago, we had a woman celebrate 30 days who had been showing up for like 10 months in a row, but just dedicated and willing, even though she was falling, just continuing to get back up and come and share what she was going through with us. Seeing that transformation and then seeing people look in your eyes is great. It's such a gift. So it's been fun to share, and we look forward to growing that network throughout the country.
It's
Scott
so
at
needed.
CatholicInRecovery.com for email me if you'd like more information.
And CatholicInRecovery.com is a great resource, really, for anyone. Most of us have at least someone in our life that we know could, if not ourselves, could benefit from the resource being offered. Scott, one of the things about this book, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments, that I've found to be so engrossing, I think it stems from what you're talking about in the fellowship of your community that you're building, but the stories that are in here and the transparency of people. I'm always drawn to story, but the honesty with which people have agreed to share their stories, and you share your own story. I know you've changed a lot of names to protect the privacy and anonymity of those that are featured in the book, but say a little bit about collecting those stories and what you learned from what other people had to share with you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Being able to share other stories has been such a gift and an honor. I don't take that lightly, that opportunity. So, I mean, there have been so many people that have touched my life and have shared their experience, strength, and hope with me in my road to finding freedom through recovery. So it wasn't tough to, determine who it was that I wanted to feature. In some ways, there were so many people that have just had such a huge impact on me that, I feel so gifted on a daily basis to be able to encounter such people. There's one guy, John, who I talk about in the last chapter 12. Mm-hmm. And he is a guy that I met a week into sobriety. I was a week sober, didn't have much hope for myself, but 5 or 7 days of sobriety under my belt, which was the first time in a long time. And he, like many others, had reached his hand out to me and asked to get together one-on-one. And we did. We sat down for coffee. And his voice was getting a little hoarse. It was hard to understand what he was saying. But he was telling me about growing up in the Midwest, just like I did, and growing up a Green Bay Packer fan, just like I did. And, his life coming to a point where he had gotten so miserable that he had a gun in his mouth, feeling the cold metal of a gun in his mouth, but put it down because he couldn't answer the question properly, what if there is a God? And that led him on a road to recovery, which, 25 or 26 years later, he was sitting there at a Starbucks talking to me and sharing that story with me and just sharing the hope that I, needed to get through that day. But what was happening to John was that he was coming down with ALS, and that hoarseness on his voice was where it was starting, and soon took over his body. It took over his ability to really function physically, mentally, all there, and is still with us today, but now functions from a wheelchair, communicating with an iPad, and doing so at a rate of about 2 or 3 words per minute. But while he was going through this, he was continuing to use the principles of recovery, the 12 steps of recovery to get through that. First, admit that he's powerless over this condition, that his body was going to be taken from him more or less. And then just going through the motions of what he knew and what he had learned through recovery and through getting sober. And he said that, the struggles that he has with ALS aren't even close to the struggles that he had as an alcoholic and drug addict, and that the hopelessness that he knew from that and the opportunity that God gave him to get through that gave him no doubt that he was able to overcome ALS and what was to come. So he's been a great inspiration, and being able to share his story, he touches so many lives. And even prior to the ALS, was someone that restarted his career, revamped his career, went to nursing school, applied the principles of the 12 steps when he started managing a floor at the hospital, and just continued to apply these principles in all of his affairs. And he's a beautiful man, and sharing his story was great. I had a chance about a week or two to give him the book.
Oh, wow.
And
That
sign
must
the
have been a
copy
special
to him.
moment.
It was. And what's great is that he doesn't talk. And so it was a moment there where we just embraced each other for like probably 5 minutes, weeping, crying, just holding each other, expressing the things that words can't say. And it was just beautiful. It was awesome. So let me thank you for that opportunity. That was a moment in my life I'll never forget.
We'll thank the Holy Spirit. I give him all the credit. So, Scott, so I don't want to go into anything that's too personal, but I can't help but say happy graduation. And also you're a newlywed, a relative newlywed, right?
Yeah.
So are you comfortable sharing a little bit about how those changes in your life have blessed the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so school and relationship, were 2 things that I lost as an active alcoholic and drug addict, and were 2 things that I thought were going to be impossible for me to get back. When I started drinking at 17, that was towards the end of high school, I had worked really hard at an opportunity to get a scholarship to be on a debate team in college. And so I was going to school at Pace University in New York City for about a year and a half when I really got accelerated into my alcoholism and drug use. So lost that opportunity, and other attempts back at school were marred by a bad grade point average, and also just my addictions just keeping me down and kind of driving me further into the ground in that front. And at the same time, what really propelled me to get sober was a relationship that I had lost with a woman who was very Catholic and came from a strong Catholic family, but just had enough of my deceitfulness, dishonesty, and manipulation. And so that had left. And getting sober was really an opportunity to reclaim, get those things back. But it was more than that. It was first finding myself and finding what was the direction that I wanted to go in. And I'm really grateful for some opportunities that didn't take place early on, because I was just finding out who I was, and in this place of self-discovery, I didn't know what I wanted or what I needed, or, I was just trying to find out who I was and who God was and what that relationship looks like. So fast forward a few years, I got into community college, went through 5 semesters of community college. It was humbling, very humbling, and then got accepted at Point Loma Nazarene University and completed my bachelor's degree there this past spring. At the same time, I was actually meeting Jacqueline, my wife. We met at a young adult Bible study at St. Bridget's, our parish here in San Diego. Shout out to all the great people at St. Bridget's. And we started dating, or we're getting to know each other. And I was dealing with this insecurity of not really being in this place professionally or with my academic goals that I wanted to be, and thought that I had to have it all together before I would court a woman of her standing. And so I was, I think I had gotten a rejection letter that day as I was going through community college. I was applying to 4-year universities who were not letting me in. And this was a source of frustration. And we were meeting one day, and I shared with her that I was frustrated that I didn't get into college. I'm not sure if I'll ever get into a four-year college, and just kind of bringing that to her. And she just handled it with such charity, and just reminded me that it was my character and not my accomplishments that was what impressed her. And and just getting to know Jacqueline in ways that was bringing some of my insecurities to her, and she just embraced that and embraced me, and was really grateful for my willingness to be honest at the same time with some of those things that were a source of insecurity. And so our relationship grew, and it turned out that prior to dating me, her previous serious relationship was with a guy that was an active drug addict. And so she had been through some of the work herself, and actually had done some of the work of the 12 steps to find some personal security and freedom, and really set up healthy boundaries. So I think that over the last 2 years, and even since our marriage last September, one of the things that we've been growing together has been growing in recovery, and growing in what that looks like in our relationship. And I tell you what, applying the principles of the 12 steps to my marriage has been such a blessing. I am so grateful for some of the tools that I've learned in that fellowship of recovery. It's so great.
Well, I won't make you start thinking about your second book just yet. I'll give you some time to continue launching this one. But I want to say a big thank you to Jacqueline for her support of what clearly is an important apostolate that's going to really blossom in your life, Scott. Our guest today is Scott Weeman. He's the author of this beautiful book that you're seeing backwards on Facebook, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments. And I want to share that I'm giving away this awesome, signed by the author copy. And all you need to do is leave a comment here on Facebook. You can simply say hi or whatever. Tell Scott he's awesome. Or drop an email to lisa@catholicmom.com if you're watching or listening to this after the fact. So Scott, we've been through so much, and there's so much yet to come. I want to say thank you again for being someone that I really do consider a role model and a blessing. And I want to know kind of how people can help support the work that you're doing, how best to kind of reach out to the resources, and where to find you.
Yeah, CatholicInRecovery.com is a great starting point for all of that. Some information about our ministry, the book, and other things. Starting a meeting, finding a meeting. If you're interested in starting a meeting in your community, we are at a point to provide resources for you to do so. You can email me at scott@CatholicInRecovery.com with specific questions, either personally or questions regarding our ministry, or if you have questions about recovery or the church, and I'd be happy to field those questions. Support can be made in a variety of ways. We're certainly happy to have people volunteer to help us expand or reach that ministry and bring Catholic in Recovery resources to those that need them most. And in addition, we are available and could always use monetary or financial resources as well. So if you have the means and are willing to financially support, we happily accept your financial donations, and
And you're all set up as a nonprofit now, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So this might be a great time of the year when you're considering gifts to make a gift in honor of a loved one in your life to a really, really worthy nonprofit. And mark my words that 5 years from now, Scott's going to be jetting across the country, setting these up all over the place. And I do want to say that I hope you'll consider the book as a gift for your parish. I think a lot of parishes out there have parish libraries, and this might be the kind of book that you might think, well, what is somebody going to think if I buy this book or whatever? People are going to worry about me. But I think this is a book that once you pick it up and read it, you're going to realize that whether or not you're working the steps for yourself, there's something in here for everyone. And that's a knowledge of how much God loves us and wants to bring us home to him. And what a gift to place this maybe in a parish library where somebody could find it that really, really needs a companion. Scott, just say a final word to anybody out there who thinks they're just too far gone, too lost. What message you'd send to them?
Yeah, anything is possible. Anything is possible. There was a time in my life at the tender age of 26 years old when I thought that it was all gone, that the selfish behavior that I had gone through and the self-seeking motives that I had would never be changed. And that was a really, I think that I was viewing God not by God's image, but I was viewing God, making God in my image, rather than viewing myself in the image of God. And I think that embracing that love, embracing your identity as a beloved son or daughter of God with whom he is well pleased, is a really important starting point. To know that, you, where you are today is, you can make a difference. You can change and not even make a change, but just be embraced by the love and let that flow through you. It's not as much work as it may seem to be. And, we just have to get out of our own way sometimes.
And you're not alone. Absolutely never alone. Great. Well, Scott, I want to say thanks, and I hope you have an amazing Christmas. I hope that the weather stays warm, but we get a little bit of sprinkles out here in California. Yeah. And for folks who want to pick up the 12 steps and the sacraments, you can find that at your local Catholic bookstore at AveMariaPress.com or online at BarnesandNoble.com or Amazon.com. And definitely check out Catholic in Recovery. Remember that I'm going to be giving away this awesome author signed copy. So if you missed the Facebook Live and you want to get your copy, just drop an email before next Sunday. What's the date next Sunday? The 17th, I think. Gosh, we're 2 weeks out from Christmas. That's so crazy. Mm-hmm. Just drop an email to lisa@catholicmom.com to enter for your chance to win. Just say, I want to win that book. And we'll have links in our show notes to Scott's great resources and to all the information that you need to bring Catholic in Recovery to your parish and to get a hold of this book. So, Scott, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Lisa. I hope you have an awesome Christmas. And to everybody watching and listening, thank you. I'm hoping to sneak in one more Facebook Live before Christmas, and I think if it's the guest that I hope, there's going to be 2 of them, so it'll be all squished into your little cell phone on Facebook Live, but it'll be really awesome. And I'm so grateful to everybody for helping me to reboot my podcast. And if there's somebody that you'd like to see on Facebook Live with me, or that you'd like to hear on a podcast, drop me an email and let me know your suggestions. And until then, have an awesome week, and we'll see you next time. God bless. Bye, Scott.
See ya.